Hi, this video is looking at the problem of narcotics, and I'll leave you the link to this video and links to a couple of the articles I'm going to share with you. And, well, you only have to watch this one video really to have concrete evidence of exactly what is being funded by this prohibition, this ban on drugs. And it's funding every type of crime. The people in Afghanistan are heavily oppressed, enslaved to working for the landowners who would, you know, basically drugs lords. They get nothing, the Afghanistan people, for these drugs, the majority of them. What they do get is to be controlled and heavily manipulated by gangs and groups of criminals who use their profits to buy weapons like this, who then start participating in acts of terrorism, because as it goes, one crime leads another. Once somebody's been persuaded to step off the path of the law, as it were, then, you know, crimes get greater and greater. They get drawn into committing even greater crimes. A lot of them are addicted to drugs themselves, so, you know, they often lack conscience about what they're doing. And then from Afghanistan, it's then introducing crimes, gangs and groups, as it explains in this film, into all the countries that border Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, and then it's going into Africa, you know, and then we've got all the impacts of the war on drugs in South America, and all the crime and horror that's causing. And then we know that it also corrupts our own police force and customs, because there's an incentive of cash there for people, especially once it gets into Britain. Prices suddenly rise extortionately, and then you've got they start running their own little drugs gangs, you know, and that gang will then depend on recruiting as many addicts as possible in order to have a market for their produce, and then the market itself is enslaved to those drug dealers, and all kinds of things are happening. You know, people are selling their children to be abused in order to get a fix. People are using these illegal drugs to trap children into prostitution, young girls especially. You know, they get picked up, get given a nice time, 13, 14-year-old girls. They get them addicted to something like cocaine. The only place they can get the cocaine off is the people that have groomed them, and then next thing it's like, well, if you want some cocaine this time, you're going to have to sleep with 4 of my friends. And then those girls are then used to recruit more girls or boys, whatever the market's demanding. It is just absolutely so evil. It's evil. You know, count the costs of the war on drugs. 100 billion each year. That's just the global spending. Exceeds 100 billion every year. And it's probably more than that. You know, I think that is a mean estimate. There you go. It costs money to arrest the people who are involved in drug abuse, you know, or drug dealing. It costs money to investigate them, because these costs are like looking at there you go, 2-3 billion on police, courts and corrections, and 1.1 billion in direct health care costs every year. Because like I say, the ban has actually increased the number of addicts. They've increased the number of addicts. Of course it's going to increase the number of addicts, because the people who are profiting out of an illegal substance need more addicts. And what we actually need is education. And we do know that one of the ways that they create addicts is by child abuse, abusing children. And because a lot of children who've suffered, adults who've suffered emotional and sexual abuse as children, they're the ones that are most likely to become addicts. Because they've got a problem. Society isn't addressing their problem, because we're spending too much time, effort and trouble focused on policing drugs, illegal drugs, you see. That's more important to Britain, to British police, than attending to child abuse and arresting people who are abusing children. And we know that it does involve corruption of the police, and it involves corruption, you know, because it's a crime that spreads crime. And, you know, this world knew exactly what it was doing when they shifted the experiment of prohibition against alcohol onto what they called narcotics. This is what was going on in America with the with the alcohol prohibition.
Gang warfare. The gangsters turn against themselves. They slaughter each other. Murder becomes synonymous with Chicago.
Yeah. It created... That prohibition against alcohol in America unleashed havoc on America. It corrupted every single person in every position of power, because they all had their access to their whiskey, and somebody had to provide it, because it was no longer able to be obtained by the usual means, you know, by legitimate means. And so they suddenly have to depend on people who are prepared to break the law, and those kind of people are always going to be the biggest egos, the most brutal people, psychotics, people who take risks, people who are impoverished and need money. Well, all you have to do is make some illegal alcohol. Yeah, you might get caught, you might get shot, but people will do it. And it just unleashed havoc. And so once they realised, and then that was it, people went crazy immediately, because the people of those days, of the 1920s and 30s, by the time they banned, I think it was late 1920s, they did stop the prohibition. But that was because the people rose up against it, because they'd had enough. They'd witnessed, you know, there'd been temperance groups campaigning for banning alcohol for years and years, decades, because alcohol does have a terrible impact. But those people did not realise, you see, that you can't ban things like this without creating even more trouble. You have to look at the reasons of why you've got masses of alcoholics. Perhaps they're very depressed. Perhaps your society isn't really producing happy people. It's producing the kind of people who are so unhappy with life that they'd rather just blot it out with alcohol. So the way then is to address the problem and help people to be happy. But that is not what 1920s America was about. That's not what America's ever been about, because it's been controlled by a group of nasty little bankers who just want to use the people as fodder to control for their profits and fulfilling their every fantasies and stupid whims. And we all know that the ban on marijuana was a covert way of actually putting a huge tax on hemp, so that hemp was no longer a threat to the cotton industry and DuPont's emerging oil-based plastics industry, and also Randolph William Hearst's investments in wood pulp paper machines, you know, his wood pulp paper factories that he borrowed huge sums to set up to print his newspapers and magazines, and also he just invested in buying loads of forest land in Mexico to sustain his wood pulp. But there along came American scientists, state-employed scientists, saying, oh look, we can create actually 4 times as much paper with just 1 acre of hemp that you can regrow in 3 months every year, okay, than we'd get from 4 acres of forest land that then will take decades to regrow. And actually, the paper from hemp is a lot stronger. It's less susceptible to mould. It lasts longer, and it doesn't need actually really any bleaching because it naturally comes out a nice creamy colour. Oh no. Suddenly that was it. Hemp, massive tax slapped on hemp because they've banned marijuana, because the plants are identical, the hemp plant and the marijuana plant, because they're of the same family. It's just that in hemp there's only a very little of the THC, if any, compared to the amount of THC in the sativa variety of hemp. So suddenly they ban that, and then they say, well, you know, you're never going to be able to tell if they're growing the illegal marijuana in with the hemp crops. It's going to be impossible to police. The only way to do it is to slap a huge tax on hemp, and then that'll stop people from growing hemp, because we don't need it. Because actually, you see, and it was a way of denying livelihoods and profits to the people in order to keep control of the people and vamp off the people by the big oil corporations who'd invested a lot of money in DuPont in the hope that they're going to be able to find a use and a market for their oil waste that was a huge headache because it's toxic and you can't just throw it away. And it was getting to be a big headache. Oh, what can we do with this oil waste? And DuPont comes along, and the oil people, the oil men, invest huge sums in DuPont. And then all of a sudden, as the American scientists, state-employed scientists, discover that hemp can produce wonderful paper, then they discover, oh, it can produce a special type of plastic that's actually biodegradable. Well, nobody's allowed to cut in their market. And it meant that the existing hemp farmers, whose product was traditionally being used for rope, shipping rope and hard-wearing clothes, suddenly it was realised that all these people stood to gain substantial profits. They'd be cutting into William Randolph Hearst's paper industry, his paper profits. They would have gone bankrupt, actually, a lot of them. And so, rather than a handful of men go bankrupt, you're best off impose crime and criminals. You're best off impose gangland warfare on the whole world, okay, on the whole world, right to this very day, in order to protect a few bankers and their corporations' interests in the 1930s. The whole world to this very day is still suffering the shite of it all. And we're paying for it. We're paying for it financially, and we're paying for it emotionally, we're paying for it intellectually, psychologically and physically, and it is damaging our children. And it's turned our children into a prey. It's corrupted our police, it's corrupted every single position of power, and we know damn well that the richer they are, the more likely they are to be using drugs. And who was it? Some journalist went into the Houses of Parliament a couple of years ago and did a few tests on the surfaces of the loos and found that every single loo had been used for somebody to draw a line in, a line of coke. They're all at it. And as I say, these rich users, they don't care. They don't care about the amount of people who've been terrorised and criminalised and enslaved in order to deliver this powder onto their tray to go up their nose. Because they just enjoy. They enjoy the product, but they also enjoy all this horror as well. They're profiting off this as well, because somebody's selling them these arms, these weapons. And that is what it's all about. And that's why we need to stand up with the people and tell them, like the American people did about when they first tried it with alcohol. We need to stand up and say no to prohibition. Let all nature's products be decriminalised, let people buy and sell them, okay, and let people use them as they see fit. I mean, obviously things like poisons, arsenic and stuff like that, they do need to be controlled because they are dangerous, and we need to know who's buying them, because people can be poisoned. They're a risk. But at the end of the day, you're not going to get anybody addicted to arsenic, are you? So there are certain things that do need to be controlled because they are deadly. But at the end of the day, like I say, they're not as a risk as putting a ban on substances, mind-altering substances that are going to attract people, and that is going to provide an incentive for people to recruit addicts, okay? It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. The only way is to educate our children and the public about so-called drugs, you know, natural mind-altering substances, is to educate the public about them, educate children about them, make sure that they're sold through, you know, the legitimate channels. It's like anything in Britain, isn't it? Even people will buy tobacco off the black market. But the black market will provide it cheaper, you see. That's all. Whereas now the way that they've got it is that the black market is making huge profits off this. You know, there are countless businesses in countries all over the world, and especially Britain, countless businesses are merely money laundering fronts. So that means you've got your local councils who are dependent directly on drugs barons, whether they know it or not. Because a lot of the businesses that are established in their city aren't actually providing anything really. They're just a front. And yes, council, you'll get your council tax. Taxman, you'll get your bit of money. And this is all mine. It's all been legitimately earned. Except it hasn't. And as I say, people are selling their children even. It is... We need to stop it, because this is a man-made law. You see, this is a typical example of the laws of man, of how damaging they are, because man, you know, the man who thinks that he's God, okay, this is how damaging he is. His laws themselves are a corruption and a crime against humanity. We have a right to use nature's resources. Mexico has a right to be able to legitimately profit off its national product, as has Afghanistan. And let it be done legitimately. And then it empowers a completely different type of psychology to this lot, who themselves now are victims. These are all victims of Western influences, right down to the weapons they're carrying. even the criminals themselves are victims of crime. Because that's what crime does. It's like a hall of mirrors. There's an echo of pain, and it needs to be stopped. We need to stop it. We need a police attention on protecting our children, so they don't grow up susceptible to drug dealers, so they don't, need drugs in order to help them just to stay conscious. So we don't have as many alcoholics. So people are happy actually being alive and living and being sober. And in a country like Britain, they're everywhere. There's no way that Prohibition has massively increased the number of addicts. Because like I say, the traders need users. And then the users are then actually recruited to go and get prey on more people, to introduce them. And as I say, it's not marijuana, it's the gateway drug, it's alcohol. But also it's abuse and misery that makes people turn to drugs. Because I know from my life in Britain, I don't take those things, and it actually was my stance because of the pain and suffering that is caused by them, and I just feel like I can't participate in that, so I never took them. But then I didn't want to when I saw the effect it had on people, especially cocaine. It seems to make them very egotistical and feel like they're capable of anything. So I could see they're not really nice drugs. I don't want my persona. I don't need a drug-related persona. I was abused by an alcoholic, you see, so no. But the people that I've watched, everywhere I go, to clubs, parties, they're there. The coke, the powders, they are there, and people are using them. Cocaine especially. Everywhere I go. But the people who are using their drugs, I've noticed mostly professional people, and they're not addicted. They don't use them during the week. Weekends. That's their bit of fun. This is the cost of people's bit of fun. Whether it's happening in Mexico, whether it's happening here, and we do know that, as I say, the top people, the richest people are involved in this. The banks have earned billions and billions and billions from drugs money laundering. It's a huge crime, okay? Prohibition is a crime against life. It's a crime against humanity. And as I say, I'll leave you this link. Please watch this video. Please wake up to it and stand up against it. Rise up against prohibition. We need to decriminalise the narcotics, and we need to do it quick, because this planet is really struggling. Our children are seriously at risk, and they need immediate attention. There's problems in this world that need immediate attention, and they aren't getting it because all the attention's going on the illegal drugs. The users and the dealers and the traders and the growers, and it is absolutely sick beyond belief that we still tolerate it. And especially in Britain, that is why now I am starting to get very, very annoyed and angry with especially professional class white British people that are using these drugs, and they know damn well that the impoverished, the ones being imprisoned, nobody's ever going to go and search their house. They get away with it. They use them with impunity. And they've always got a little local drug dealer who will be living on some council estate somewhere, and will be being provided by a very rich person that brings them in. Because the people on council estates can't go across to Mexico smuggling drugs in, no. They come in with the help of customs, with the help of corrupt police, with the help of corrupt officials, even diplomats carrying them in their diplomatic bags. So, and you know, I can't stand the hypocrisy and the casual ignorance of what is actually providing their pleasure. And it is abuse of every single kind. And that is why all you people of Britain, especially you professional ones, you need to open up now and stand up for our rights and to remove this ban, okay? To remove prohibition, and you have a duty, an ethical duty, to speak out and do that, because it is you who are most benefiting from it all in every which way possible. And it is time for the people on the ground to say no. Say no to the drugs ban. And yes to education. And yes to more police time and attention on protecting our children. Please.